Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Business Spotlight. My guest today is Doug Nance, who is a voice artist based in Calgary. And thanks for joining us today, Doug.
Well, thanks, Mario, for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, tell me what you do. Voice artist is a kind of a cool title to have, but tell me exactly what you do.
Well, my cell line, if you want to call it that, my slogan is when he speaks, it's an event.
Yeah.
So really what I do is when I talk, hopefully it makes it a big event. And that's the idea in two ways. One is doing live announcing. And so that would be things like monster truck shows, freestyle motocross shows all across Canada. I just finished doing a show in Winnipeg. That's why I sound like this. And the other side of it is voiceover, where I would record things like documentaries and commercials and that sort of thing in a recording studio that I have in my house.
Interesting. So, when you look at the range of stuff that you do, how different is each one? How do you cater your voice to I don't know, something like monster trucks or whatever, you know what I mean? to
Well,
to
you can hear it in my voice right now. A lot of it was a bit of shouting and, fun. It's kind of like the wrestling of motorsports, if you want to call it that. And it's very theatrical and a lot of fun. And I mean, these guys do some pretty amazing things with 10,000-pound trucks and freestyle motocross guys flying in the air. It's a pretty exciting thing. And of course, for me, it's very much like a circus, very, theatrical and so on, because really these guys are doing all of this in a hockey arena in 200 feet. It's astounding how they can control those machines. The other side of that is, of course, voiceover. And that's an entirely different thing, because while it may be theatrical and over the top with live stuff, when you're talking like this, me and you, if I start talking, like a monster truck guy, you're going to think I'm crazy. So the idea being, I think, really is to be very genuine. That can be a bit of a challenge because, of course, we all want to try and be something that we're not, kind of find the voice is sometimes the conversation. But the reality is that it's what's behind the voice that counts. It's that sort of genuine emotional endorsement that I work hard to try and make sure that I've got in voiceover, which is a lot different than the theatrical guy of live announcing.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me how you got started in this business.
Well, when I was a kid, my grandmother was an artist. My parents were figure skaters. I was around the arts community a great deal when I was young. The other thing that was an advantage was I grew tall fairly fast. And the reason why I say all of that is because I was an actor when I was a kid on stage. And so we were singing things like operettas. And with a voice like this one, it was a lot of speaking singing. But the idea is that I grew up kind of getting a lot of leads because I was tall and loud. They didn't have microphones in these little theaters in those days. So from there, I went into I thought I was going to be an artist all my life. And I failed the entrance exam to the Alberta College of Art. So I had no idea what to do. I became a disc jockey, and that led to the idea of listening to commercials and hearing other voices doing things that were reading as opposed to just being live with music. That led me to production. So I was a producer in radio for quite a period of time, and then kind of discovered voiceover as a part of that. But back then, it was all done in studio. So the only place that you could do voiceover was either at a radio station or at a recording studio in the market that you were in.
Yeah.
Well, that changed a lot when the internet came along, right? Because that allowed the whole world to open up.
Yeah.
But it also changed things from a competition standpoint. And what I mean by that is not just more people, but the exact people that you need. So why would I do an English voiceover, accent or something like that when you could hire a real guy from England on the internet? So what it really changed was bringing back almost full circle to when I was a kid to being that actor again and really trying to interpret the script, not just say the script. And that changed things a lot from the point of view of, as an artist, brought me back to really what it was, which is that interpretation as an artist as opposed to just a voiceover guy. And I think that worked out pretty well.
So why do you love doing this? You obviously have a passion for it. I can tell in your voice. But why do you love doing this?
Well, I think it's a creative outlet. I mean, all my life I had thought I was going to be an artist. I draw. Sometimes I post it on my social media sites and so on. And I do a bunch of drawing and that sort of thing. And I thought, I'm going to be an artist. That's what I'm going to do. And when that didn't happen, I thought, well, then I better go, get a real job and all that sort of thing. And you know what? In most of my career, I was an and as an artist. So I would be a voiceover artist and a live announcer, a voiceover artist and a media salesperson. That's where I met you, was at the Calgary Herald.
Exactly.
So yeah, back in those days. So what happened is that I never lost that passion, as you say, for that creative, that creating something out of a bunch of words or a blank piece of paper. And what ended up happening, I think, was that because that passion continued, and so many times I was an having to eat and be an artist, the starving artist thing, that I think that what happened is that passion continued and it carried me down a path that said, okay, when the world changes, which it did with the internet, you'll be ready. You'll be a good actor by then, not just an announcer. You'll be a guy who's got a home studio early on, as opposed to trying to catch up now. Those things worked out almost like it was laid out for me. And yet in the midst of it, you go, this isn't the right thing. I shouldn't be doing this. I should be, doing something else. And yet what I found was all the way along, I was still doing that passion. I found a place and a way to do that through the whole working life.
Interesting. So did this come naturally to you, or do you did you grow up as a kid doing the announcing? It's funny. I was just reminiscing before we came on air here, just about how my buddies and I in school used to love putting on radio voices and announcing hockey games. I grew up in Ottawa, Montreal Canadiens, Le But de le Canadien compté par numéro 10, Guy Lafleur, right? So did you used to do that type of stuff?
When I was a kid, like I said, I was an actor from the time I was young on, like from about 5 or 6, I was involved in theater and this sort of thing. Again, it was kind of cavalier about it. It was just like, well, I just kind of walked in and did that sort of thing. And it was the same thing in a lot of ways with the way that voiceover kind of came along. I kind of did it in a cavalier way. And by the time I was 50, I said, I really should focus on this. Well, I thought I could bring some of that, creativity to it. I really kind of brought the business side to it and kind of worked out well because as an entrepreneur on the internet, you know what that's like. It's not like you're going and seeing people, live and in person. You're having to do things by email and sending demos and websites and all that sort of stuff. So I think that sort of passion thing is the important part. So when I was a kid, I'd like to pretend that I was something, but really I was more like a leading man. I kind of just did me and they put a costume on me. And when I was young and I was in school, I was in a special pathway from the time I was in grade 7 that was media and arts and so on and so forth. And again, it didn't seem like it was very, very hard. You just kind of just did it. But what happened for me was when I look backwards, it's funny how things, when you look at photographs of when you were young, how they kind of are telling. So one of a very early photograph of me at Christmas time is I was about 3 years old and I'm in a toy car. And strangely, my entire live announcing career for 40 something years has been motorsports entertainment. Wow. The other thing is I played circus a lot when I was little. I grew up in Toronto, went to Maple Leaf Gardens. My grandfather was the announcer for the Maple Leafs in the hockey arena. So I got to go to everything that was at Maple Leaf Gardens, including the circus. And I like to be not the clown or the acrobat. I was the ring announcer or the ringmaster. And we have a picture of me with like this old top hat and a stick with a string on it to be the whip as being, the ringmaster. So I guess the thing that happens is that when you look backwards at some of the things that have carried on in your life, I think that's where it comes from as opposed to the voice. I think it's the thing that happens inside of you as an artist as opposed to just the voice today. I hope that makes sense.
So do you have any like training in this?
Yes. And I think that there wasn't back in the day, you just kind of went in there. I mean, I became a disc jockey because I was a big fan of music. So, you just kind of went and did it. And I, kind of sounded like this. But I think the thing that happens now is that the training is really focused on the idea of, if you're going to get in this business, there's an investment into it now. You're going to have demos and websites and do marketing and all of those kind of things, because there's, the notion of, well, I'm going to get an agent and be famous is kind of, not really the real world. So I think what happens is that kind of hard work stuff kind of scares people off. And yet it shouldn't, because the idea is, over time, if you do some training, you can do some training as an actor. And what I mean by that is, the most basic of acting is substitution. So living a rich life is helpful. For example, if somebody says to me, feel prideful, I can think back to, the very first time that my son and I announced, an MMA fight together when he began his announcing career. And I hired a photographer to take pictures of that, because I knew that would be that kind of moment that could resonate with me. Well, I can draw on that as an actor to substitute that feeling for some sort of emotional intent that a piece of copy says. Well, that sounds like it makes sense, like almost like a logical thing, but it's art. It's a craft. It takes time to develop that and learn that and find that own pathway. So taking training today from places like VoiceSpot. Dan Wilmot is a former radio announcer who became a really great actor and a voiceover guy years and years ago, and developed a voiceover training program. Well, it's ideal now because it's delivered by the internet. You don't even have to go to the studio anymore. So I think that taking training, first of all, tells you two things. One, do you like it? In other words, can you do it every day and not get bored? That's that passion thing I think you were talking about. And the second thing is to make it a business, to have time to be able to build things like a war chest, an investment for things like demos and websites and so on, so that when you are kind of to the point of saying, yeah, I'm going to pursue this, you're ready on all the fronts, not just on the idea, well, I'm here now, the industry must have been waiting for me to show up.
Yeah, exactly. So, when I was, well, not when I was, and I still am a journalist, so I use these things a lot, right? That typing away like crazy. So I used to, when my boy was younger, I used to do a lot of the wrestling, and stuff like that. But I always say, stay away from the hands. I can't have anything happen to my hands. The meal ticket, basically, right? Your meal ticket is right there, right? Your voice. What do you do to protect your voice?
Well, the one thing I would suggest you don't do is announce monster truck shows back to back over a weekend. That would be number one. The thing that I find I do is I still do a lot of vocal exercise things, to kind of warm up, strengthen the voice as much as I can. The other thing is you try to time things. So, for example, this afternoon's work is all monster truck and yowling and blah, 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 all this growly stuff. But the idea being is this morning's work was a little quieter, because there's a little bit of voice still left there for the time being. So I try to kind of manage it that way. But I do know that there's a certain characteristic that comes from that, sort of ruggedness that happens to a voice. I think the days of that big, beautiful bass baritone radio announcer guy, I don't think that's really a real person at all. And I think that this guy that I sound like right now is that real person, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think that's what people listen to today. I don't think that today's generation has grown up with the idea of, yes, come and sell me something, like we used to in the 60s. I think what happens now is tell me something, tell me a story about something, and then let me decide. And that, I think, is really the way I try to approach it, is just a little passion around the story, and then you make the decision.
So what do you do anything special in terms of diet, like food or drink for your voice?
Well, I travel a lot and I'm eating out of vending machines and greasy food, so I'm pretty sure that one's out. The thing that I do is I try to steam, my voice. Like, so for example, if I've really gone out there and torn it up kind of thing, I'll put, a towel over a sink and kind of steam it. I use a lot of lozenges and, of course, an awful lot of water.
Yeah.
Try to make sure that I drink, sometimes when we're doing, 2 shows in a day, I'll go through 6 bottles of water in that day just in those shows to try and keep hydrated.
Wow. Okay, then. So, out of all the stuff that you've done, tell me what it is you haven't done that you would like to do.
That's a good question. I gave it some thought on that. I try to, again, the business guy is kind of the and to the artist. I tend to try and each year kind of rethink my business plan. Am I on the right track? Is there anything that's left undone? And the one thing that I really find that I really like and would like to do more of, or I'm looking to do more of, is sort of broadcast narration, things like documentaries and that sort of thing. I find that they're usually beautiful pictures. I won an award in 2017, an International Announcer Award, if you want to call it that, as a narrator for an Antarctica program that was just amazing pictures, as you can imagine, of
Gosh, yeah.
glaciers and so on, and an originally composed orchestral score for that film. It was truly a magnificent piece of creativity, if you will. You got to interpret it very much as an under voice because the pictures were so powerful. I find that work is so subtle, and really brings out that thing that I find, which is that wonder about things, that telling you the story, but letting the story tell itself, as opposed to me dramatizing that story. And
Yeah.
I find that that's kind of work that I really, really am aspiring to do toward the end of my career, because it's such wonderful work to do, so collaboratively creative. The copy is wonderful. The pictures are beautiful. The music is great. Those kind of things are wonderful to work on. And I'm looking forward to trying to work on more of that as my career continues on.
Okay, Doug, I can't leave you without putting you on the spot. Uh, can you give me a brief sample of something you would do with the monster trucks?
Well, there's this classic line, isn't there? You can have the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge. What do you think? Did I pass the audition?
Okay, you're hired. I'll hire you from my promotional videos. And Doug, before we leave, how do people get a hold of you?
It's pretty easy. I'm on the web under my name, Doug Denance. That's Doug, Doug, Denance, DENANCE.com. You can't miss it. It's got a horizon, and it says, when he speaks, it's an event.
All right, thanks, Doug, for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, that was Doug Denance, a voice artist based in Calgary. I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Business Spotlight. Thanks for joining us today.